All right, you guys are going to have to use your imagination here. Pretend that I am Judge Kenneth Bell. Unless that's illegal, then in that case, for legal reasons, this is a joke. Just anyways, I hereby rule preliminary injunction granted. I've always wanted to do that. It seems cool to do, but I don't know. I'm not cut out for that. Anyways, yes. A decision has been made by the judge in the case of 2311 in Front Row versus NASCAR. Oh boy. To catch you all up, there's a lawsuit going on. In case you didn't know that, it's been pending since September when Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin's 2311 team and Bob Jenkins' Front Row team decided to file a lawsuit against NASCAR. They were the only two teams who did not sign the new charter deal that will start in 2025 and go through 2031. And they just didn't like the terms of the deal. They did not think that it was negotiated fairly. And so they filed a lawsuit, an antitrust lawsuit that essentially is accusing NASCAR of being a monopoly. There's been a lot of small developments. There's been a lot of other things that have gone on. But then about a month ago, let's call it, the first preliminary injunction got denied. Now, what is a preliminary injunction? Good question. I'm not a legal expert, but in this case, I do know what it was. It was to grant the two teams, 2311 and Front Row, who were suing NASCAR, it would grant them charters for 2025 while this legal case is ongoing. And why that's a big deal is because there was a potential that the two teams suing would have to race as open teams in 2025. And 2311 has two full-time cars, and they announced that they're adding a third full-time car. Front Row announced way back in May that they're going to have three full-time cars. So, and that's with charters. That's assuming they have charters. And if they raced as open cars, number one, they are not guaranteed spots in the field every single week. That's number one. That's a bigger deal at Daytona, because Daytona is the highest paying race and there's usually more than 40 cars, but usually you make it every week, every other week, I should say. But the other big deal is money. That is right. The open car teams get a lot less money than the chartered teams. It's a part of the deal. Obviously, if you're a chartered team, you're committed to NASCAR, you have to race every race, so you get a little bit more. There's more money to be spread around to the chartered teams. So it was a big financial hit. And then there was another factor that there were contract issues, and we're going to talk about some of those in a minute. But some of the drivers, and more importantly, some of the sponsors had clauses in their contracts that said, if you're not a chartered team, if you're not guaranteed to be at the track every week, if you're not guaranteed to do this and that, we can pull out of our deal. We can no longer drive for you. Our contract is void as a driver, or as a sponsor, we no longer have to pay fees for you to have your stickers on our car. So there was a lot of different factors. And in fact, the first preliminary injunction got denied. It was denied. And of course, 2311 in Front Row, Jeffrey Kessler, the lead attorney, they turned around and said, appeal, 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 appeal. And as a result, they had to go through this process again. There was a judge change, in fact. I don't know why there was a judge change, but there was a different judge at the beginning of this thing, believe it or not. Mind-blowing stuff here. The only extent of my law knowledge is watching Better Call Saul. So, yeah, that's all I know. But here are some of the details. Let's read through some of this. So, as I was saying with the sponsors and the drivers, this is in somewhere in the documents. It says, as described above, since the court denied the initial motion, 2311's top 2024 driver Tyler Reddick has given notice that the team is in breach of his driver contract, which will allow him to leave the team if the breach is not cured in 30 days, which is today. Drivers Riley Herbst, Noah Gregson, Bubba Wallace, and Corey Heim have similar contracts and or have expressed their need for immediate resolution of the uncertainty surrounding the approaching racing season. The lack of chartered cars has also impacted plaintiffs' sponsor relationships, specifically with key sponsors Monster Energy and Love's Travel Stops. These are changed circumstances that the court finds have moved plaintiffs' likely harm from remote and speculative to present and immediate. Then there's a bunch of legal talk down here. So basically, when it got denied the first time, the judge said, you need to somehow prove that if you don't have chargers in 2025, there's going to be immediate damage. There's going to be damage that hurts you right now, not speculative damage that you could say, we're going to lose money. Like, you can't just say that, you know? You actually have to prove, how are you going to lose money? Well, that's two big reasons right there. Sponsorships out. Loves and Monster saying, oh, you don't have charters? Oh, you're not guaranteed every week? Ooh. How do we get out of this thing again? Isn't there in our contract? It's that. Cool. And so 2311, front row, they turned her out and they used that and they said, hey, this is not speculative. This is hard evidence. Paper up. They will leave. It's in the contract. This will financially ruin us. And the new judge said, it's pretty good stuff right there. Granted. Oh, I need to get the hammer again. Granted. Hope I'm not doing damage to this chair here. I'm very excited about this, if you can't tell. I've never got to talk about law this much. I'm probably wrong on some of it. And then another thing is that you've got to think about the driver contracts too. So now Tyler Reddick, he's all in. He's good. Bubba Wallace is good. But this is also really good for Riley Herbst. Riley Herbst, they just announced that they had purchased a third charter. And this is another addition. The Stewart-Haas Racing charter sales have gone through. One went to Trackhouse. One stayed with Haas factory team. One went to 2311. And one went over to Front Row. The problem is, if they didn't have the guarantee of the charters, if the preliminary injunction was denied, they would not get those charters from Stewart-Haas Racing. I really don't know what would have happened to them otherwise. But now they have them. Now the sales can go through. The purchase can happen. 2311 front row, you get the charter, piece of paper, whatever it is that you actually get, and they give Stewart-Haas the money. So all good, unless NASCAR appeals. If NASCAR appeals, we go through this again, and I don't know at what point it stops. Like, what if they win the appeal, and then can 2311 re-appeal? And then if they win that, like, can this stop at some point is my question. Anyways, this is one of the things we needed a quick answer on, because the 2025 season, yes, in our point of view, from a normal person's point of view, oh, that's 2 months away. We can figure that out. We got time for the Daytona 5. 2 months. That's nothing. But it's not nothing. For a team, for a driver, if you're a driver and you don't have a contract, you're going to want to get one as soon as possible. If this doesn't get decided until February 3rd, 2 weeks before the Daytona 500, that's a really tough position, because you're going to be looking for a seat, but almost all the seats are locked up at that point, and that includes the part-time seats, and that includes the lower series seats. And none of these guys are going to want to do that. And in terms of sponsorship, same situation. So there was never really a win in this situation, I feel like, if you're the teams, in terms of losing this preliminary injunction. You could not lose this in a sense, but they didn't. They won for today, we think, unless NASCAR appeals. But it's a big deal. Jeffrey Kessler said, we welcome today's decision by Judge Bell, granting a preliminary injunction in our favor. The court's ruling allows 2311 and Front Row Motorsports to race existing cars as chartered teams in next year's Cup Series. The decision also requires NASCAR to approve both teams' purchases of a third charter from Stewart-Haas Racing and allow these cars to also race as chartered teams in the 2025 season. We are confident in the strength of our case and will continue to fight so that racing can thrive and become a more competitive and fair sport in ways that benefit teams, drivers, sponsors, and most importantly, our fans. So yes, drivers have contracts. Todd Gilliland, Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, Riley Herbst, Noah Gragson, maybe Zane Smith. They're all good. Sponsors, Loves, Monster Energy, Air Force, McDonald's. You guys are all good too. For now. Unless there's another appeal. So, yes, there was another statement somewhere that said like Bubba Wallace was saying that he needed to know immediately so he could explore other options. And this is where I find interesting is this is just me here, my opinion talking here, but I'm pretty sure that they involved their drivers in some of this legal stuff because, yes, they could theoretically leave, but I don't believe that Tyler Reddick or Bubba Wallace would leave 2311 Racing. Bubba just signed a contract extension. Tyler Reddick just made the Final Four. They're both at a highly competitive team. I don't see why they would actually leave, but if they publicly voice that if they don't have a contract and they leave, once again, that's not speculative. That is immediate harm to the team. A driver saying they'll leave if they don't have a contract. So I think that's kind of clever in a sense, but maybe they did really mean it. Maybe I'm just stupid and spewing stuff out as always, but thank you again for watching this video. Very busy news day, apparently. We got Perez out at Red Bull. We got the preliminary injunction granted for 2311 and Front Row Motorsports. So in conclusion, they have their charters for 2025. We'll see if NASCAR appeals. I'll see you guys later this week for more videos of whatever I do, college football playoff, terrible bracket, and anything else.